How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this live stream. I am Piotr. I'm a mix of things. I have worked in the UN, I've worked in foreign policy for the best part of sort of 6, 7 years. And now we are here covering what is a insane 24, 48 hours. Now, this is the first of what will probably be multiple live streams over the next few days, weeks, who knows, depending upon how much my mental health can manage. But I'm delighted to be joined by Brigitte Khair, who is a former senior UN official like myself and has been part of many different, I think, areas of humanitarian work, and someone who's got a lot of experience in the Middle East, in sort of foreign affairs. And Brigitte, I was keen to speak to you because we've been chatting on and off in spaces, and generally right now we've seen obviously a second round of strikes across the Middle East today. Oman was hit, Cyprus was hit, or targeted at least, but the main, I think, focus that we want to cover is probably the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia's threats of maybe retaliating against Iran and their, well, technically retaliation to America's strikes. But you know, you've got so much happening right now, and probably for you as well. What are you focusing on the ground in the Gulf?
Hi, thank you very much, Piotr, for hosting me. And we are in one of these situations right now where, as the saying goes, decades pass and nothing happens, and in one day a decade happens. And this is what we have been witnessing since yesterday, quoting the famous Lenin. It is the way things have happened so quickly about all around us, but specifically about a regime that has changed the face of the Middle East since it came about in 1979. One book that was written about it that so aptly described how that wave, that just one incident has changed the whole perception of what is the identity of the region by Iran itself, a country of now 93 million people, and also by Turkey and by the Gulf areas, and especially what it had done to Saudi Arabia. So a very good friend wrote a book called The Black Wave, Kim Gattas. She was with BBC, and she has written that book chronicling basically how things changed since the Iranian regime came about, how they assassinated the university students and the left-wing activists that actually created the wave that sort of toppled the Shah and brought Khomeini from France on that famous Air France flight that had the left-wing leader of the students next to him, who was assassinated shortly after that, and then the wave of assassinations that happened after that, and the theocracy that took hold of this amazing country for almost half a century. And now we're witnessing very, very strange, after the 12-day war, of course, of last June. Right now, things are happening so quickly. And with somebody who was the Ayatollah, who was commanding proxy armies in 5 Arab countries. We always forget Hamas as well, that he was commanding in Gaza. But he was actually the puppeteer that had 5 proxy armies that toppled, like in Lebanon. I am Lebanese, and what they have done with Hezbollah in 1982, that took hold, that planned and executed the explosions in the Marine barracks and French paratrooper barracks that killed 241 Marines and 69 French paratroopers, that forced Reagan to take the Americans from Lebanon after the PLO had left Lebanon and went to Tunisia the year before, in 1982. So in 1983, there was like a whole destructive wave of entrenching the proxy of Iran that filled the vacuum of the PLO, and that in cahoots with the Syrian army, entrenched itself with the IRGC in Bekaa and changed the face of Lebanon, a beautiful country that was coming out of a war, that had a lot of hope with the election of Bashir Gemayel as a president, that wanted to bring everybody together and announce it as one country. What happened then is that he was assassinated. Sabra and Shatila happened, very, very unfortunate massacres by his the loyalists. And so everything that we see and the war in Iraq, I served in Iraq with the UN, and it was very obvious. I was posted in Basra, and in Basra, which is predominantly Shiite, the Iraqis could not stand the Iranians, not only because of the hegemony of the Iranians that tried to co-opt the oil, the very vast oil fields of Iraq, but also because of the 8-year war that killed and made the people that I met in Basra were mostly in black, because they either had the son killed, the husband killed, the brother killed, in a lot of these Iraqi families. So Iran had expansionist views since the beginning. In 2003, when the Americans started a war that, in my opinion, was not justified against Iraq, what happened then is that they, between what they've done in Afghanistan and what they've done in Iran, they took two very big pieces off the chessboard that were opposed to Iran. So Iran had a free hand, and I think there is some responsibility there with the West that gave a free hand.
Now, Brigitte, that the balance of power. I don't think you have been around in the spaces when I've been contributing, or I don't think we've overlapped yet until today. But one of the main points that I quickly wanted to point out in the bigger scheme of things is that before October 7th, there was this illusion, this idea that Iran was one of the main competitors to be the regional hegemon, along with Saudi Arabia, right? Turkey is a slightly unique case, and
so is Israel.
Well, Israel. Well, yes. Well, then people will be like, "Well, what about Egypt?" So, but I think in this main regard, the arch rivalry between the Iranians and the Saudis, right? And part of what I wanted to speak to you about in this stream specifically was about the fact that we might see Saudi Arabia retaliating, the Gulf states getting involved. But, Iran a couple of years ago, it had the plausible deniability thing. It had the illusion that it could command powers, proxies across the Middle East, even in cells and sort of Venezuela, right? And then we had
Buenos Aires.
And we could have the destruction of Hamas or the dismantling of Hezbollah. The Houthis are largely still intact. The loss of Syria as a state, the whole Shia crescent has been, undermined. And now Iran itself in the past, 6-8 months has been revealed to be a bit of a paper tiger in some people's opinions, right? That they can't control their own airspace, that the military was not as coordinated or as effective as people thought it was. The Iron Dome proved to be more effective in defending Israel. Point is that Iran is not the country it was because when you first started sharing your comments, right, you were talking about Iran is one of the major players, but it isn't now. And so, and yet they're going around targeting everybody across the Middle East, even Oman, that all they've tried to do is be a mediator. And, some people call them the Switzerland of the Middle East. What's going on here? Are the Emiratis going to, are they going to respond to this all-out attacks by the Iranians? Or, I don't know, from your experience of dealing with these different groups?
Look, there is a difference from when the Iranians burnt the Saudi embassy in Tehran, and how that did not create the backlash that people thought it would, because of what Iran represented, and it's the illusion that it was this huge, scary country that nobody could mess with. One. From then until now, and what has happened, as you said, destruction of Hamas, that the Iranians were actually in charge of, as one of their proxies, destruction of Hezbollah, and how they didn't even launch one rocket at Israel when it assassinated Hezbollah. For us Lebanese, that was the best news that ever happened to us, because then the terrorist militia was being obliterated, and to us that meant a new hope for Lebanon. The same thing happened with the Syrians that had suffered 1 million almost killed with barrel bombs that they have stored in our port in Lebanon with the ammonium nitrate. Hezbollah going into Syria at the behest of Iran and killing all these Syrians and really destroying the cities, the ancient cities of Syria, which is also a country that has suffered a 50-year dictatorship under the Assad father and son. And then what happened in Iraq, where they were losing control because the Iraqis, even in parliament, in the parliamentary elections, the Iraqis were starting to stand up and reclaim their country. What happened with the Kurds in Erbil, that they're completely out of control of the Iranians. And then again, what happened with the Houthis and the destruction of the Houthis. You're saying that they are rebuilding themselves, but we don't see them doing anything right now. And I think Yemen is in a state of disrepair because of all the wars that happened to it. Now, the Saudis, the Emiratis, and all the other Gulf countries who were indiscriminately and illegally hit, because what they hit was not the bases. What was hit were the civilian infrastructure, the airports, the ports. I was in Nepal yesterday, and one of the debris of the drones and the missiles that were sent by Iran fell on a hotel, which terrorized people. This is not American bases, no matter what Arakshi says, and he said that today. He said we are attacking the Gulf, only the American bases in the Gulf, which is not true, because infrastructure is being targeted. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. I think they are very mad at what has been happening to them. And it is not the usual Iranian planning that we can see here. We can see a very irrational reactions that are not in line with the usual Persian, thoughtful, chess moves that we are used to. There's nothing like that. They are in a state of, I think, extreme pressure after they have killed that many thousands of their own people under the orders of Khamenei. And what has happened to them internationally, and that they saw the whole world turning against them, like how the world turned for a while after Gaza against Israel. They saw that all of the soft power that they tried, I mean, being in the Human Rights Council, being with the UN, and doing the whole spiel of like Iran is an amazing country and it is helping the Palestinians, and it usually uses the Palestinians as, you know, this is the place where they try to get their brownie points from the international community, is that they are moral, yes, frame. Absolutely. And people forget, I was a student at the university in Beirut when they and Hezbollah have surrounded the camps in Beirut, and they have killed Palestinians when their ally Assad has killed Palestinians in all the Palestinian camps in Lebanon, how Hezbollah has killed Palestinians in the Yarmouk camp in Damascus. So it's easy to just hold that banner and say we care about Palestinians, but they really, really in action have not done that. On the contrary, they use them as a pawn. And what is happening now is their reaction against the Gulf is so short-sighted and so wrong that right now, even the very dovish Emirati government's representative, like the minister who came today on CNN, Minister Reem al-Hashimi, even herself said we reserve the right to react to the unwarranted aggression, because you remember all of the Gulf countries were actually pressuring the US and doing
there was tacit,
nonstop. Absolutely.
There was tacit, I don't know if you want to say support, but there was an unwillingness to give.
The diplomatic machine was working nonstop.
Yeah,
to try and avert the war. They didn't want to be here. You know, they no Gulf country wanted this to be, because they could have been a deal whereby the regime in Iran would say to Trump, I mean, the balance of power is very clear. They would say to this buildup of extreme power around them, they would say, okay, we accept all the conditions that you put in front of us. Let's work together. He would have done like he's done in Venezuela. He would have chosen a moderate like Arakji, like even Pezeshkian is not as hardline as Khamenei, and it would have been a transition. But they didn't do that. They, in their mind, they are sure that they will prevail. They are sure that they have the country under their hold because they have ruled for almost half a century. They didn't imagine that it would come to here. And at the same time, what they've done today was so short-sighted and so wrong. I think it is the mistake that might, cost them a lot, is attacking Cyprus. They attacked an EU country. NATO's Chapter 5 will say, Article number 5 will say that attacking one is attacking all. So they might be dragging Europe into the war. And this is, how many armies and how many navies and how many air forces?
But why are they doing that then, right? For me, I think Cyprus is a non-starter, mainly because I don't think they're going to continue. I think that would mainly be a unilateral action by the British government, although I have very strong thoughts on that and pretty critical of the British government for their ineptitude, for their lack of action. But why is this happening then? What is the goal of the Islamic Republic? Are they just lashing out in desperation because they're in survival mode, or are they actually trying to deter America from continuing? Because one argument I saw recently was that if Iran can put enough pressure on economic and tourist centers like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc., then the partner countries like the Gulf states of America will start putting pressure on the states to stop its operations because it's having such negative repercussions in the economy. Do you think that that's the goal of the strategy of the Islamic Republic, or it's just they don't have one?
No, absolutely. They do have the strategy, and they have started that weeks before. If you follow their announcements week before, we will hit the Gulf areas where there are concentrations of U.S. bases and U.S. They have tried to avert the war, the attack on them, weeks before Trump decided to attack. Because and from what you heard and I heard, that they got the intelligence that there will be a meeting with Khamenei, and then they knew where he was and they couldn't pass up the opportunity, like what happened with Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut. But what happened now is that the war already started, so they couldn't avert it because they were playing on time. If you remember before, from the Obama time and the Biden time, they think that playing time, because they never changed. Ayatollah has been there since 1989, so they don't change. This is what al-Assad did before, playing on time until administrations change, everybody changes, they stay. So they wait them out. And this time it wasn't going to happen with Trump. This is a second term, and he already had that as a campaign promise. So I think they miscalculated. They thought that they would write it out and they would threaten the UAE and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries and Qatar, of course, so that they would pressure the Americans to avert the war. The war wasn't averted, so now they want them to stop. Maybe they could salvage some of what they still have in terms of Basij, IRGC, the power, and the military structure. And it's not happening. I think it will run its course. And if I were in the shoes of the Iranian administration right now, the regime, I would choose a moderate to try and salvage what they can, rather than having most of the country destroyed.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, though, because I think probably a couple of hours ago, I mean, I don't know where to sort of talk about it, right? But let's say a couple of hours ago, I was traveling much of today. For people who are used to a different background, I'm actually in Italy for some upcoming events, so stay tuned for those. This isn't, I don't usually record in my kitchen. But simply a couple of hours ago, Pezeshkian, the president who is for now still alive, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, we will enact the wants and desires of our supreme leader, right? And I thought Pezeshkian was considered a moderate, but it seems to me like, are there really moderates in the Islamic Republic, or is it more about hardliners and restrainers, right? Because for me, I personally think there's a distinction between those who want to just continue to blanket, the Middle East with more missiles and rockets and stuff. But then there are others who are like, no, let's think about the survival of the regime. let's restrain ourselves, re-engage with the Americans over the deal, because Trump's also mentioned that in the past 24 hours, right? He mentioned this idea of off-ramps. They'll have pauses to give them opportunities to re-engage. So do you think there could be that approach, that there are restrainers and they try to engage diplomatically, or you think it's too late for that and they're just going to continue with the military approach?
I mean, look, we have seen the example of Khatami.
That's a huge speculative question, but
yeah, I mean, look, we have seen the examples of Khatami, who was supposed to be the moderate. We saw even Rouhani, who was supposed to be a moderate. Definitely not Raisi, because he was the judge that had the capital punishment for thousands. He used to be called the judge of death. But even Pezeshkian was supposed to be a moderate as well. But Javad Zarif, a lot of people were supposed to be. I think it's wishful thinking on the part of the West, because I don't think this theocracy that is built on ideology, that sort of justifies its expansionist regime, justifies killing 1 million Syrians, justifies destroying Yemen for their own purposes, using these proxies in such a contemptuous way that, I mean, they're just so heartless in the way they have done. They have the Green Revolution, how many of their own countrymen they killed. So when you see this ideology, you start to understand that it's not about engagement with the outside world, except what makes sense to them, which is the exporting the revolution. They have meddled in Captagon. They have created a whole narco-terrorism complex. They have had bus explosions in Bulgaria. They had been caught planning explosions in Germany. They have done the Buenos Aires explosion. I mean, you name it. And storing 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate in a civilian structure like the Beirut port in the middle of a very dense capital. And what happened after that, this shows that this regime is not about moderation. There's nothing moderate about that. Doing the explosion, the truck bomb on the American embassy, on the barracks, all of these young Marines that were killed, and they were there for a reason, to save the peace in Lebanon after the civil war and after the pullout of the PLOs. So what happened in the West, I don't think the awakening has come yet, whereby we in the East, we know that there is no changing this regime, just like there was no changing of the regime in Syria. I mean, how could you make Sinwar a moderate? I mean, there are so many things in this part of the world that when ideology is concerned, there's just no changing them. You can dream.
Well, I think a lot of people are dreaming right now. In some of what they say. But Brigitte, do you not think it's feasible that, well, do you not, can it be argued though that Trump, right, and the maximum pressurists, whether they're neocons or MAGA, they were right in that, you cannot negotiate with these people. The only way is coercion. So you're saying that the West hasn't realized it yet? Or is that more sort of the establishment of the Americas and Europe, and that the Trump camp are the ones who've realized that and are the refreshing taste, even if they go about it in an illegal way? Or you think you don't see it like that?
I mean, was there at any point, was there any hope from anyone in Europe that Putin is going to change and he's going to become a humanitarian, for example, and stop the war in Ukraine just because he felt like it? I do think that Europe and the US, I think the Republicans are on point in realizing that very, very different kind of thinking than Obama, who placated and and engaged with the Iranian regime, putting rosy-colored glasses. He brought all the Europeans with him. Oh, they're going to do exactly as we say. Meanwhile, I mean, they tricked the IAEA. They didn't do what they were supposed. They were drilling in Natanz. They were doing everything they were not supposed to do, that they promised not to do. He freed the money from the sanctions. Lebanon was getting, in Hezbollah, it was getting $1 billion a year, so that they had a parallel structure of schools, of social services, of hospitals, and of everything else. And they started making weapons in Lebanon. They started the drug trade in Lebanon. They're killing one country after the other. And in Syria, the same thing happened, with a much, much larger death toll, of course. And all the refugees that broke the back of Lebanon and Jordan and all the countries in Turkey where all the refugees went. So all of that was Iranian regime. So what did the world do? They kept on placating them until this administration. I think the key person is not only President Trump. He is a driving factor, absolutely, and especially that it's his second term. But I think it's people like Marco Rubio, who understands the situation extremely well. Maybe there are like not vultures. What do you call them? He's not a neocon, but he's a very, very radical pro-war, like Senator Lindsey Graham. But I think Marco Rubio is the driving factor behind this.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Before him, even Mike Pompeo was of the same.
Well, yes, but Mike Pompeo. No, yes, but I also. Look, I mean, in retrospection, we can argue about the mistakes of the Obama administration. Maybe I was only in my early 20s then when the JCPOA was established. Yeah, I was 22. So, maybe
people had hope. You can't blame people for having hope.
Hoped that it's better to try to engage and avoid the conflict versus Trump, who is, when you first come, if Trump wasn't, I think, so personally vulgar to so many people, then there might not be so much opposition to his operations.
You're right.
If he wasn't so personally polarizing, then it might be slightly different. But because if it was Mitt Romney, right, a more traditional conservative or Republican who has a very strong, desire to go in there, undergo regime change, right? That's one thing, but Mitt Romney is, still a reasonable person, I think, in that regard. It's because it's Trump and his approach to everything. But at the same time, maybe this wouldn't happen unless it was someone like Trump, a complete, I don't know. But what do you think, therefore, happens now then, right, in the next day, a couple of days? Do you think the Saudis are going to get involved? And just actually on that point, as another question, the Emiratis have been particularly hit hard, or attempted to be hit hard by Iran. But what I think is incredibly impressive, and I haven't heard many people touch on it yet, is how well they're intercepting the missiles, right? I had no idea that Iran, the UAE had this level of military capability. I mean, they fund a lot of proxy wars and stuff in Africa, but I had no idea that they were this capable. So what do you think comes next, and based on what we're seeing from the Emiratis as an example?
There's my wishful thinking and what I do think rationally will happen. My wishful thinking is that the Gulf would join, and at least for the Emirates, which they will never do. But I do think that it's time they got back their 3 occupied islands, which are very strategic. They are have been occupied by Iran since the 70s. And I do think that they should get them back. So this is their chance to engage and to get those back as spoils of war, which I don't think they will do. They're a very Pacific, they're very peace oriented, but they are being hit more than Israel. I mean, of course, they have amazing capabilities. The defense forces are doing an incredible job. Of course, the technology is Israeli technology and American technology, and they are using them. They're very well trained. They are using them perfectly. So we are averting hundreds of strikes a day. I mean, any other city would have many more escaping the THAAD and the Patriot missiles and whatever. But there's also the Air Force that is going after the drones. But it is the sheer amount that shows just how much contempt and aggressivity there is towards the Emirates, although the Emirates has been helping Iran nonstop. Diplomatically and trying to help them vis-a-vis the Americans, because they are the go-between. But even, I mean, when you see a country like Iran hitting Oman, which is its biggest ally, hitting Qatar was the biggest ally of Iran. It has been supporting Iran.
Yeah.
So this is where you see that, preserving the regime, being a hardliner, trumps everything else. No pun intended about the word Trump, but on something that I wish would happen as well is that I in my opinion, if you have Trump speaking with the language and style of Carney, the whole world would be rallying behind him.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. But what I think is interesting about that, Brigitte, is that Mark Carney, I mean, people who follow the channel will know that I'm quite a big fan of his. Not on everything. I'm not on domestic. I'm talking purely in a foreign policy sense. He's willing to make comments and stand up. But he's also refreshing in that he has acknowledged that he actually stands with America's operations against the Islamic Republic or whatever, which is, considering their differences, he's willing to have said that. So that's interesting. But I guess the last question I have for you, because I really wanted to grab your thoughts before this, and everyone who's watching, I will be going live again in about half an hour with another guest about the Middle East. But Brigitte, we'll definitely have you back in the next couple of days. Is the Strait of Hormuz, right? The different conflicting reports. I haven't had a chance to look at the latest information in the past hour. But, Iran claims it's closed it off only to Russian and Chinese vessels. But obviously this is on the border with Saudi Arabia, with Emirati, with Kuwait, with Qatar. What's your assessment there? What can happen there? Could the Saudis do anything? What do you think happens?
Well, look, we heard report from CMA CGM, which is one of the biggest, along with Maersk's, that they're both halting all traffic through Hormuz because, of course, I mean, there's the issue of security and insurance and reinsurance, and this will affect in the long term, because the effect will, just like COVID, what happened during COVID, you will get the effect later on. It is shipment as well as oil. So oil has already started rising. I read a report today that it might hit by next week, if this continues, it might hit the 100. So there will be quite a lot of moving parts now with the Strait of Hormuz. But what is happening now, because they closed it, this will reinforce the willingness and the determination of the US and others who are hurt by this and hurt by the high dollar, the high price of brute, in trying to get Iran to topple, at least the regime to topple, because they think that it is leverage for them, but I think it is leverage against them, and we can see that happening. I think one Palau ship was hit today, so they are already attacking ships, and this will not fly well with all the world powers, whereby, I mean, everybody is waiting. I saw today a meme of like a cupboard full of glasses and plates that is tipping, and this is the stock market that's going to open tomorrow. So on Monday, hell will break loose financially, and a lot of people, as you know, I mean, a lot of people are looking at that, and a lot of countries want this to end as quickly as possible, and it will not end by letting Iran win after everything. And today we had deaths with the American army, and we had injured in the American army. We had deaths in different countries that were hit by the missiles. So it's not going to end well for the Iranian regime. At least this is my perception right now.
No, as I say, we'll definitely have to have you back, I think, well, maybe even tomorrow, I don't know. You've got a life outside of...
No, we're all tied to the house now. I mean, we get alerts on our phones, and...
are you in... If you don't mind me asking, but
I'm in Abu Dhabi.
You're in Abu Dhabi? Oh, my God, guys.
So we're getting the alerts all the time, not to leave.
No, but I think you've made a good point, and I think there's a couple comments here which are really interesting, right? Brent is going to go up, but to what extent? Because as we saw in the summer, markets seem to have priced in the volatility, right? That events in the Middle East don't transcend the Middle East. Like, this is why I get irritated when people say World War III. It's not World War III. Is it terrible? And, you know, chaos? Yes, it is. But it's not going to spread into Europe. It's not going, well, maybe refugees in a long-term scenario with Iran, but like, it's not going to spread beyond that, right?
The Iranians are very proud people. They'll never be refugees, honestly.
No,
I think they're...
No, but I think, and one person just said that ships are no longer, thanks, Justima, no, ships are not passing through the Strait. So that is going to be a pressure point, which I don't think the American government can ignore. And maybe the Iranians, through asymmetric warfare, can you know, put enough pressure on this decisive point that that they force the hand a little bit or something. But another point is that Putin will definitely enjoy this spike. If Brent goes up, that's going to benefit the Russian economy. They're selling it at
but China won't.
That's a good point. Oh, Brigitte, but still, everyone. See you in half an hour. Thank you, Brigitte, for joining. Everyone, speak soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.